Story 1. Severe major depression can leave you feeling devoid of energy, making even simple tasks, like brushing your teeth, feel like a significant accomplishment. It can give you the sense of being trapped, as if you are caught in a bundle of wet laundry, where the more you struggle, the more entangled and exhausted you become. Story 2. Abuse is a harsh reality that many cannot fully understand unless they have experienced it, and I hope that they never have to endure something so terrible. Even for those who have, the impact can vary significantly from one individual to another. Story 3. Depression. My ex-girlfriend tried to be understanding, but whenever we talked about how my depression was affecting me in my life, it became clear she had no idea what it was like. Story 4. Crippling anxiety is often misunderstood. People tend to believe that you can simply let it go or think positively, but the reality is that true understanding comes only through personal experience. It's not as simple as just thinking positive thoughts or releasing your worries. These feelings can latch onto you, causing your mind to go through numerous scenarios, what-ifs, and racing thoughts. It is far more challenging than many realize. Story 5. Your house is burning down. It's not just the actual fire. It's the years of your life spent putting your world back together again. Story 6. When your parents die, I lost my mom 20 years after I lost my dad. It's odd to say, but you can be a fully grown adult and still feel like an orphan. Story 7. Not as bad as most of these, but being lied to, cheated on, and manipulated has recently happened to me. It is much worse than I ever thought it would be. Trust is something I no longer possess. Story 8. Mental breakdown due to stress and depression. I haven't felt the same since 2022. I talked about it with a coworker who told me that I may never be the same, and that's okay. It was the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me, and I keep it in mind when I need comfort. Story 9. Going no contact with a close family member can be a difficult decision. Many people may judge you and offer unsolicited advice about reconciliation because family is often considered the most important aspect of life. However, they do not understand that the choice to permanently distance yourself from a parent or sibling is not made lightly or over trivial matters. If your parent or sibling were like those of the individuals judging you who struggle to imagine cutting ties, the situation may not have reached this point. Story 10. Medical gaslighting in gynecology. Endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and many other disease diagnoses can take decades due to the consistent dismissal of women's pain. Story 11. Loss, heartbreak, and abuse from a parent, along with isolation and harassment, are significant fears I have in life. Story 12. Migraine headaches are not just another type of headache. They can last for days. Not everyone experiences a migraine with aura. Story 13. Bed bugs. I didn't realize we had bed bugs until it was too late, and I threw everything away. I moved and was paranoid for months that we might have brought some with us. Not to mention the bed bug nightmares, waking up from them in a panic and needing to search the room to ensure it was just a nightmare and not real. Any random itch for years made my mind immediately think, is that a bed bug? Story 14. Jail. Survival stories. Trauma. Death in the family. Life-threatening surgery. Divorce. Difficult breakups. Therapy. Story 15. Personally, at this point in my life, my postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and psychosis after I had my son was the worst thing I have been through in my 47 years. Story 16. Any type of long-term medical illness or injury, especially if it lasts over a year, can significantly impact quality of life. Conditions such as cancer, organ failure, chronic pain, or any injury that hinders daily activities are examples of this. Many people take their health for granted and overlook how normal activities, like taking a shower, can bring joy to everyday life. Story 17. Traumatic brain injury involves not just the accident itself, but also the recovery process, therapies, surgeries, and the adjustment to the fact that one may never be the same afterward. Story 18. Seeing someone you know is not a good person succeed because of their connections is frustrating. Story 19. Being drowned by an octopus. To be fair, I was hunting it first, but then it turned the tables and started pulling me down. I had a spear, but it did not last long. The octopus was about 7 feet from tip to tip. Story 20. I struggle with severe anxiety, an eating disorder, and alcoholism. Did something happen to me that I don't remember? Or am I just broken? Story 21. Addiction. There are no words that can fully capture the experience of having your mental state taken over by a substance. Story 22. I would say almost everything. I can understand and be as knowledgeable as possible about a subject, but only by experiencing it firsthand can you truly understand. Story 23. I was catatonic after taking a medication prescribed by a doctor in the emergency room. I took it and felt a surge of energy. I wondered if this was what meth was like. For hours later, I went to bed, curled up in the fetal position, and became catatonic again. I could only move my eyes. When my phone rang, I heard it but couldn't move at all for 4 hours, just lying there. Frightened me. After 4 hours, I returned to normal. I threw out the medication and called my primary care physician the next day. Story 24. Grief. My dad died suddenly and completely unexpectedly last year. No goodbyes, no final words. Just gone. My last memory of him is seeing him in his coffin, and it honestly haunts me. The journey through grief has been the hardest thing I have experienced and also enlightening in ways I never would have expected. Story 25. Being a caregiver for an aging or declining parent or close relative is not only exhausting. It confronts you with the harsh realities of life, including its cruelty, unfairness, and brevity. Story 26. Stroke recovery. One day you are yourself, and the next day you feel like a different version of yourself. Almost the same, but slightly different. Story 27. Bipolar manic episodes. I remember feeling like I had the energy of the world inside me. To my horrified mother, who discovered me climbing and jumping from windowsill to windowsill, her first thought was that I was possessed. I don't even remember most of it, besides the strange feeling of having so much energy. My account of it differs significantly from those who witnessed it. It was strange all around. Story 28. Proper childhood trauma. I have tried discussing it with many people, and only those who also had very difficult childhoods understood what I was talking about. There is a specific expression on people's faces when they do not understand. It feels very isolating. Story 29. Opiate withdrawal. People often say statements like, just have some willpower. They don't understand how it completely takes over your brain and body, making it impossible to focus on anything else. Story 30. Experiencing a natural disaster is unlike anything you see on the news, in movies, or on the internet. It's completely different to actually be in it. Story 31. Proper depression is not just feeling upset or unhappy. It is a serious condition. However, one thing that saved me was having cats and a supportive woman by my side. Depression is a terrible illness. Unfortunately, many people do not understand it. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it is something we often bring upon ourselves. Story 32. Waking up from a coma with a breathing tube in your throat and connected to more tubes and hoses than you thought possible. You are unable to communicate with your loved ones during their restricted visit. It is a very specific feeling when the people you love tell you that you are okay and safe, but you cannot ask any questions about how you ended up in that room. Story 33. Depression. For someone without depression, it is impossible to comprehend how much it impacts every single aspect of life. It feels like going through each day with a mental burden dragging behind you. Everything seems darker. Mornings blend into afternoons because they all feel the same. It is also difficult for those suffering from depression to understand what recovery feels like. After spending years working on oneself, taking medication, and seeing therapists, there comes a moment when you realize you have been genuinely happy for the past few months. However, depression can fluctuate. Once you recover for the first time, it becomes a matter of accepting that the situation is temporary and that there is a light at the end. Story 34. Pregnancy loss. When I experienced early losses and then a stillbirth, no one I knew had gone through it. It was difficult. I know they all meant well, but some of the things they said were painful. Story 35. Grief is the profound sorrow experienced after the death of a loved one. It is not just about losing someone, but also feeling as though a part of yourself is gone, especially when it involves a sibling, a parent, or the unimaginable loss of a child. People often do not comprehend the depth of grief until they face it themselves, and it can be an incredibly painful experience. Story 36. Having your thyroid fail and gaining 150 pounds in about 2 months, then never getting close to your original weight again, even with thyroid medication. I started at around 120 pounds and now weigh 220, having pretty much stayed there since it all began. Even with doctors monitoring my diet, there has been no real change despite trying various diets under their supervision. The fat shaming and dismissal, as well as the comments questioning whether I truly have a thyroid problem, make it clear that I'm not believed. I've been told that I'm just lazy and overweight when it's actually a medical issue. After experiencing such rapid weight gain, I also struggle with significant body dysmorphia. Story 37. Being hospitalized for a few days or longer can be challenging. Many of the nurses I work with are young and healthy. They often become frustrated whenever a patient expresses discomfort, whether it's a complaint or just a struggle to cope. They frequently return to the station saying that the patient is being dramatic or overly emotional, which can come off as dismissive. They don't recognize how dehumanizing it can feel to stay in a hospital for an extended period. You wear an uncomfortable gown, are often connected to an intravenous line that limits your mobility, share a room with a stranger, and experience feelings of unattractiveness and unpleasant odors. The food is not enjoyable, you have to ask for help for even the simplest tasks. And all of this is compounded by the underlying health issues and pain. I wish they had more compassion. Once you have been through it, you truly understand how difficult it can be. Story 38. Physical disability and chronic pain are significant issues. As a doctor being both a practitioner and a patient, it pains me to say this. The only thing I can treasure is knowing I never once treated any patient the way I was treated. I'm not claiming to be a better doctor. I am asserting that I am fundamentally humane. When someone is most in need of basic dignity, how difficult is it to treat them like they matter? They are not just an object beneath you. I noticed the medical professionals most prone to writing under my care were the least caring of all. Surgeons are a particular breed. I am a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, so perhaps they do not consider me a legitimate doctor, but I will say this. Anyone capable of performing surgery for a living harbors some deeply repressed disturbances. Surgeons also prefer their patients unconscious. That way, the patients don't ask questions and are so sedated they cannot consent. Pain management is crucial. However, the manner in which it is done is unconscionable. There is a primitive aversion to helplessness. In the wild, a group of animals would be burdened if they took on an injured member. It would slow them down. The injured animal self-isolates. Human beings can be a cruel species. You become invisible. You aren't looked at or spoken to by name. You are rendered a non-entity. It was like being the insect in Kafka's Metamorphosis. Just aghast in horror. Story 39. Infertility is a challenging experience. Unless you have experienced it, it can be difficult to understand the profound impact it has. Some comments, even when well-intended, can deeply affect those who are struggling with this issue. Story 40. An anxiety attack. I dislike when people say, "I have anxiety," when they really mean they're just nervous or feeling uneasy. True anxiety is a serious struggle. Story 41. If you don't have money, life is very hard, but once you have it, it doesn't automatically make you happy. Story 42. Losing someone is difficult. It gets better with time, but the feeling of emptiness when you think about not being able to see them again is something you cannot easily describe to others. Story 43. Being poor is challenging. Whenever I know any of my friends are struggling, I send a card in the mail with some cash and a note expressing my love. I remember. Story 44. As I've gotten older, I realize we all have to make our own mistakes. There was a whole generation that said, "Never again." But again keeps happening repeatedly, regardless of the topic. Story 45. Trauma and adversity can create cycles of shame, guilt, and hopelessness for those affected by complex trauma. It takes inner strength to overcome these challenges. Story 46. Depression is just one type of mental disorder. I experienced severe depression, depersonalization, derealization, and some mood disorders. I literally can't feel anything, neither happy, sad, excited, nor anxious, and I haven't felt anything except panic attacks in years. It's like drowning while breathing. At the same time, I want to disappear from existence because of my depression. The sensations of derealization and depersonalization are truly indescribable. I also suffer from chronic pain, migraines, and scoliosis. However, the mental pain is what really overwhelms me. I can't even imagine dealing with conditions like schizophrenia or borderline personality disorder. Mental health issues are incredibly challenging. Story 47. Chronic pain is a daily experience, with my level of pain being a 4, which is likely a 9 for most people. Some pain can be managed with medication, but many cannot. This condition brings numerous changes to my life. I often hear the phrase, "But you don't look sick," as I have learned to mask my pain over the years. I also struggle with depression. Story 48. Having a premature baby in the neonatal intensive care unit and not being able to take them home until they are strong enough. Story 49. Going no contact with family can be a significant decision. The moment you fully accept that having a parent in your life is not safe for you is impactful. You work on healing and rebuilding yourself, while others are shocked because they believe you should maintain the relationship. Even with a strong support network, there can still be a feeling of isolation. Story 50. Discovering that your parents have deceived you throughout your life and that one or both may not be genetically related to you. Story 51. Having not one, but two terrible parents who never cared about you, subjected you to horrific abuse, and ultimately abandoned you to pick up the pieces for the rest of your life. They continue living their lives as if you don't exist, even raising other people's children and giving them the opportunities, love, and support they never intended to give you. Story 52. Someone I am friends with lost his wife to suicide, which coincided with my soulmate leaving me. His wife was suddenly gone, but he was tormented by thoughts of what he could have done differently. My soulmate dated someone else while still in love with me, and due to his misery and other factors, he caused me pain for 3 years. You cannot compare grief, pain, and suffering, but I am uncertain which would be worse for me. I hope I never have to find out. Story 53. Addiction. Losing your entire family leaves you with only yourself. The feeling of never quite belonging. Having a child or children who have been severely alienated from you and want nothing to do with you. Realizing you have been in love with someone for half your life, only to find out that they do not feel the same, are embarrassed by you, and only want you for physical intimacy. Story 54. Family and domestic violence. Many people do not understand why someone does not just leave. If it were as simple as that, everyone would do it at the first warning sign. This notion also downplays the insidious tactics that abusers use, which is likely often the intended effect. Story 55. Being poor, pregnancy and childbirth, betrayal, social anxiety, death of a child, domestic abuse, racism, sexism, chronic pain. Story 56. The way incest distorts a person's understanding of love. When I was a teenager, my parents sent me to an inpatient treatment center in another state to work through trauma from being raped and to manage my eating disorder and substance use. I participated in a severe trauma therapy group while I was there. One girl, Mackenzie, had been sexually abused by her father from the time she was 4 until she was 15. She shared her story, and at the end, she mentioned that her father would often have one of them sleep in his bedroom overnight so he could show them how much he loved them. There was no consistent pattern. One of them could stay for a week straight every other day or just once a week. Holding back tears, Mackenzie expressed that on the nights her sister was in their father's room, she felt jealous and hurt for not being the one chosen to receive his affection. She pondered why she wasn't good enough, why she wasn't worthy. Mackenzie broke down in tears, crying harder than I had ever seen someone cry. I knew it took immense courage for her to share that. Even though I myself was a victim, I found myself feeling grateful that I had been raped by men who were not related to me. I can't even imagine what she went through, and I often wonder how she is today. Story 57. Parents who do not love you can be challenging to understand. I am not referring to abusive parents, but rather to those who fulfill their obligations without showing affection. They will take you to school and pick you up, but once you are home, they engage in their own activities. They may interact with you during dinner, but otherwise they leave you to your own devices. They do not play with you, hug you, or ask about your day. It can feel as though you are not their child but rather a roommate. No one understands your situation because there are no visible signs that anything is wrong. You sense that something is missing but cannot identify it. To others, you appear to have a normal functioning family. The experience of not knowing what love is can be incredibly difficult to articulate, and those who have experienced love may never fully comprehend it. Story 58. Watching a loved one take their last breath is incredibly painful. I wouldn't have left my mother's bedside for anything, but I wish this wasn't my last memory of her. Story 59. Honestly, most things we aren't great at understanding through the lens of others' lived experiences. Story 60. Standing in the light at the end of the tunnel. Being able to look back at a time when you thought it was all pointless and realizing you got through it. Story 61. Both depression and anxiety can be incredibly challenging. Many people do not understand the severity of either condition. During my experience with severe depression, I lost count of how many individuals advised me to pull myself out of it or insisted, "You have a good life. You have nothing to be depressed about." Anxiety can be even more difficult to comprehend. Unless you've experienced a major panic attack, it is hard to grasp just how horrifying it can be. Story 62. Never or not having sex can lead to the perception that some individuals claim there is nothing particularly special about it. These individuals often seem to have no difficulty finding partners. Story 63. Being stuck in a financially and emotionally abusive marriage can be difficult. You look at your children and recognize the toxic nature of the relationship, but leaving could mean homelessness and losing your children to your abuser. Sometimes it feels like there are no resources available. Story 64. Being subjected to a sex change operation as an unwilling child happens to intersex children frequently. Story 65. People on Reddit are often harsh toward those who cheat, and I understand why. Cheating is a terrible action. However, it is also a very human behavior, especially under certain circumstances. I am not justifying cheating. I am simply acknowledging that it is a human experience. Those who cheat are not monsters. They are often vulnerable and in pain. Story 66. Arthritis is more than just the aches and pains of aging. It is debilitating and significantly reduces your mobility. Story 67. The pain caused by a cheating spouse, a divorce, being bullied or abused at any age, and childbirth, particularly in the case of an emergency cesarean section, is significant. There is a common belief that one forgets the pain of childbirth, but that is not true. One simply accepts that having more than one child means enduring similar pain. Other sources of pain include rejection by one's own family and poverty. I would also include addiction and mental health issues, but I currently lack direct reference points for those experiences. Story 68. Clinical depression is an illness, not an imaginary condition. Unless you experience it, you may not fully understand. It is much more than just feeling down or blue. Story 69. Divorce. People often go through divorce not by choice, but because they feel they have to. It marks the end of everything they hoped for and planned, occurring not all at once but gradually over time. Individuals may struggle to grieve the end of a difficult relationship, as others may question their sadness, believing that it was what the person wanted, or that it is better for them. Story 70. Addiction and its rock bottom. People without an addiction can only understand the concept intellectually. They can recognize that there is something fundamentally wrong with how our brains are wired. However, the absolute anguish of addiction is something that can only be truly experienced firsthand. This is not meant to downplay the horrors of watching a loved one suffer. The misery that comes from seeing a once vibrant human being become a slave to their substance of choice is something that, even in recovery, we regret forcing upon you. The reality is that if you are fortunate enough to be relatively unaffected, you may not fully comprehend this struggle. It is quite similar to other debilitating disorders. Story 71. Honestly, many things require common sense or advice that may seem trite at first until you actually experience them. Only then do you realize how deeply true and profound some of those sayings really are. Story 72. High-risk pregnancy and birth. After saying that giving birth was not a good experience for me, people have told me, I guess I have no self-preservation because I'd put myself through danger to have more children. However, I am more concerned with the fact that my child was the one not breathing when he was delivered. His life was the one in danger, not mine. Any future complicated pregnancies or births now mean my son and husband are at risk of losing their mother and wife, as well as a potential sibling. My life isn't the only concern, and even if it were, that is a good enough reason to second-guess going through it again. Story 73, literally all qualia, which refers to anything that can be experienced subjectively, can only be truly understood by actually experiencing it for yourself. While it is more palpable to consider this in relation to significant experiences whose intense nature makes them difficult to comprehend without personal experience, it applies to all experiences, not just the major ones. Imagine if you had mind-reading technology that provided access to a precise copy of someone else's qualia. Even if all the qualitative aspects of that subject's experience remained intact, once you access someone else's experience, it is no longer that person's experience. It becomes your experience of that person's experience. A new subject experiencing that process through their own perspective will always add a distinction to the original subjective process. It is like taking a photograph of a photograph. It will always be a new image, not the original. I understand the sentiment behind the question regarding how major, life-altering experiences such as grief, addiction, and loss are harder to comprehend compared to more mundane ones. However, even with the most mundane experiences, you can only truly understand them by actually going through them yourself. Subjective processes are personal in nature. Story 74. The death of a child is a profound loss. Although I did not experience it personally, my brother died at a young age, and I witnessed the impact it had on my parents. Story 75. Taking a softball to the groin from a bad bounce, then having to field 2 more line drives to left center, before returning to the bench exhausted. Story 76. One of the nicest things God does is not let people without children know what they are missing. Warren Beatty to Jerry Seinfeld, discussing having children later in life. Story 77. Chronic pain changes your experience of life, and few around you can truly understand unless they are going through the same thing. Story 78. Having your house burned down with everything you own, except for the most important people in your life. Story 79. Divorce is a profoundly gut-wrenching experience. No matter how much you try to explain it to others, those who have not gone through it will never fully understand its emotional impact, even if you are the one who made the decision. Story 80. As a man, I can only imagine giving birth. I know there are pain simulators that men can use to get a sense of it, but I do not find that convincing. There is no way we can create anything that accurately imitates passing a watermelon through a garden hose. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.